They were told the Americans would execute them on sight. No mercy for women who had served the Third Reich, they said. No forgiveness for those who wore the gray-green uniforms of the Wehrmacht auxiliaries. In April 1945, 89 German women believed they were being transported to their deaths. When the train doors finally stopped closing behind them in the chaos of collapse, the boxcar became their world. It smelled of rust and old grain. The floor was bare wood. There were no seats, no water, no food, only bodies pressed together in darkness. The grinding screech of iron wheels on iron rails never stopped. Day and night blurred into one endless movement. There was no way to sit, no way to lie down. Only standing, swaying, leaning on one another as thirst and exhaustion began to hollow them out. 12 days later, American soldiers pried open the same doors in a railway yard outside Frankfurt. What they found stopped them cold. The women inside were not standing. Most could not even lift their heads to look at the light. Some had died days earlier, their bodies propped against the walls by those still clinging to life. The living looked like ghosts, sunken eyes, cracked lips black with thirst, skin stretched tightly over bones that no longer had flesh to hide beneath. The smell hit first. Human waste, death, sickness, and desperation hung in the air like a curse. It was so thick it felt physical. Even seasoned soldiers staggered backward, hands flying to mouths as they struggled not to retch. One soldier, a farm boy from Iowa named Thomas Riley, would later write to his mother, "I thought I had seen everything this war could show me. But when I looked into that train car, I realized I had seen nothing. These were not soldiers," he wrote, "they were girls. And somebody had left them to die like animals." The word stayed with him long after the doors were closed again, and the survivors carried out into daylight. But this is not a story about death. It is a story about what happened after those doors opened, about what the enemy did when they found their enemy half dead, broken and abandoned by the regime they had served. It is a story about mercy, about what happens when cruelty ends and compassion takes its place, and about how mercy, unexpected and overwhelming, can break a person in ways that cruelty never could. The train had been abandoned 3 days before the Americans found it. In the final collapse of the German military structure, nobody knew who was supposed to guard it, where it was supposed to go, or even what it carried. It sat on a forgotten siding while the Reich burned around it. April 29, 1945. The morning was cold, the sky the color of old steel. Private Riley and his squad searched abandoned rail yards for supplies, weapons, anything the retreating Wehrmacht might have left behind as they pulled back across a dying front. They had found plenty over the weeks before. Crates of ammunition, abandoned panzers with empty fuel tanks, warehouses full of uniforms that would never be worn. War leaves debris, and the Americans had become experts at sifting through its remains. But when they approached the line of boxcars on the eastern siding, something felt wrong. The air was different, heavy. Sergeant Marcus Webb stopped first, his nose wrinkling as instinct told him something was waiting inside. Webb had smelled death before. Every soldier had by then, but this was different. This was death mixed with something else, something living, something that should not have survived but somehow still clung to breath. "You hear that?" Webb asked, raising his hand to halt the squad. They listened. At first nothing. Then faint like wind through broken glass, a sound. Not quite a moan, not quite a cry. Something human, but barely. The boxcar doors were sealed with iron bars and heavy chains, standard Wehrmacht procedure for transporting prisoners. Webb called for bolt cutters. As they waited, the sounds from inside grew clearer, scratching, weak tapping against wood. It was the sound of someone trying to knock without the strength to make a fist. When the cutters arrived, it took 3 men to break the rusted chains, metal protesting as if it did not want to release what was trapped inside. The door resisted at first, swollen in its frame from moisture and neglect. Then it gave way with a shriek of metal, sliding open and releasing a wave of darkness, heat, and a smell so strong it felt like a physical blow. Riley stumbled backward, his hand flying to his mouth. Webb held his ground, though his face went white. The sergeant had liberated concentration camps weeks before. He thought he had seen the worst humanity could do. He was wrong. The sunlight poured into the boxcar, illuminating a scene from hell. Bodies lay piled together, limbs tangled, faces frozen in exhaustion. At first glance, they looked dead. Then Webb's eyes adjusted and he realized with horror that some of the bodies were moving. Hands lifted weakly toward the light. Eyes opened, though barely. Mouths moved without sound. Someone whispered, Jesus Christ, another voice answered, barely audible. They're alive. Not all of them. In one corner, 3 bodies lay completely still, skin waxy and gray, dead for days. But the others, 60 or 70 of them, were breathing. Barely breathing, but alive, and every single one of them was a woman. They wore remnants of Wehrmacht auxiliary uniforms, gray-green skirts and jackets now filthy and torn. Some were barefoot. Others clutched small bags or suitcases, still holding possessions even as their bodies failed them. Their hair hung in matted tangles. Their faces were skeletal, cheekbones sharp beneath skin stretched tight. Hunger had stripped them down to something almost unrecognizable, something closer to survival than life. One woman, younger than the others, perhaps 20, sat propped against the wall near the door. Her eyes were open, staring at the soldiers with no fear, no hope, no emotion at all. Just emptiness. Her lips moved. Webb knelt beside her. "Can you speak?" he asked. "Do you speak English?" Her mouth kept moving, but no sound came out. Her throat was too dry to form words. Webb unscrewed his canteen and tilted it toward her mouth. She flinched as if expecting a blow. Then the water touched her lips and her eyes widened in shock. She grabbed the canteen with both hands, shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She drank in tiny sips, each one followed by a gasp as if her body had forgotten how to accept water. "Get medics!" Webb shouted over his shoulder. "Get everyone. Water, blankets, medical supplies, everything." The rail yard exploded into motion as soldiers ran to save lives they never expected to find. Within minutes, the rail yard became chaos. Soldiers ran in every direction. A field hospital was called in. Trucks arrived loaded with supplies. Officers coordinating occupation duties suddenly found themselves organizing a massive emergency rescue. One by one, the women were lifted from the boxcar. Most could not walk, many could not stand. Medics worked with desperate efficiency, checking pulses, starting IVs, wrapping skeletal bodies in army blankets. Some women cried when they were touched. Others stared in silent disbelief, unable to process that help had arrived. After days locked in darkness, the sudden presence of light, voices, and kindness felt unreal. The young woman Webb had given water to was among the first carried out. As they placed her on a stretcher, she grabbed his wrist. Her grip was weak but insistent, as if she was afraid he might disappear. She pulled him close, her cracked lips moved again. This time sound came out, a harsh whisper. 12 Tage, she said, 12 days. Webb did not speak German, but he understood numbers. He looked back at the boxcar, at the darkness and the body still inside, and felt his stomach turn. 12 days locked in there. No food, no water, no hope. You're safe now, he told her, knowing she probably could not understand the words, but hoping she might understand the tone. You're safe, her eyes closed. Not in death, but in exhaustion so deep it looked like death. The medics carried her away, her body finally giving in now that survival was no longer required. By noon, all the survivors had been evacuated. 86 women pulled from that boxcar, 3 bodies left behind to be buried later, with whatever dignity the war still allowed. The Americans spent the afternoon documenting everything. Photographs were taken, possessions were collected. Evidence was preserved, not for revenge, but so the world could not pretend this had never happened. Among the recovered items was a small diary, water-stained and filthy, written in German. It would later be translated, revealing the final entries of a woman named Margaret Hoffman, a radio operator from Hamburg. Her last entry, dated April 26, read simply, "No water for 4 days. Greta died this morning. I think I will be next. I am not afraid, only tired." But Margaret did not die. She was one of the 86 who survived. And what happened to her, and to all of them in the weeks and months that followed, would challenge everything they had been taught about the enemy. The field hospital was a collection of canvas tents set up in a cleared warehouse district. It smelled of antiseptic, canvas, and diesel fuel from the generators powering the medical equipment. The women were carried in on stretchers one after another. Their bodies were so light that soldiers remarked it felt like carrying children instead of grown women. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old Army nurse from Philadelphia, had seen suffering before. She had treated men with limbs blown off, boys screaming for their mothers as they died. But when the first stretcher came through the tent flap and she saw what lay on it, something cracked inside her chest. The woman could not have weighed more than 70 pounds. Her uniform hung off her like fabric on a skeleton. Her eyes were sunken so deep they looked like holes. Her hair, once blonde, was now dull gray, matted with filth. It was her hands that struck Mitchell most. They were curled into claws, fingers bent and rigid from days of trying to scratch through wooden walls that would never open. "Set her here," Mitchell said, forcing her voice steady, gently. They placed the stretcher on the examination table as the woman's eyes followed every movement in silent fear. The woman's eyes tracked Mitchell's movements, but she did not speak. Mitchell wondered if she even could anymore. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked in English, knowing it was futile but needing to try. There was no response. Mitchell began the examination. Severe dehydration, malnutrition bordering on starvation, signs of dysentery, possible kidney failure. Her pulse was weak and irregular. Her blood pressure barely registered. This woman was, medically speaking, dying. "Start an IV," Mitchell ordered. Saline, slow drip. She knew the body could not handle too much at once after such prolonged deprivation. As the needle slid into her arm, the woman flinched and tried to pull away. Her eyes widened in panic, but she lacked the strength to resist. Mitchell gently held her arm still. "It's okay," Mitchell said softly. "This will help you, I promise." The woman's eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from confusion at being helped by those she had been taught would show no mercy. Over the next 6 hours, all 86 women were processed through the field hospital. The staff worked without rest, starting IVs, administering glucose, checking vitals, wrapping bodies in clean blankets. Every patient was in critical condition. The doctors gave a grim prognosis. At least a dozen would not survive the night. But the Americans did not accept that prediction. They called in more supplies, more doctors, more nurses. By midnight, the field hospital had tripled in size. Additional tents erected specifically for the German women pulled from the train. They were given more than medical care. They were given dignity. After stabilization, each woman was taken to a delousing station, a converted bathhouse hastily cleaned and equipped with hot water. Real soap was provided, American soap. White, clean, faintly scented, not the gray chemical blocks they had used in Germany. For many of the women, it was the first time in years they had felt clean. Margaret Hoffman was conscious when they brought her to the bathhouse. She could walk now, barely, supported by 2 nurses. When she saw the tiled room and the steam rising from the showers, she stopped. Her exhausted mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Showers, hot water. She had heard the stories. Everyone had heard the stories about gas chambers disguised as showers. "No," she whispered in German, pulling back. "Nein, bitte nein." One nurse, a woman named Helen who spoke a little German, understood immediately. Helen knelt beside her and looked her in the eyes. "It is just water," she said slowly in German. "Nur Wasser, you are safe. I promise." Margaret searched her face for deception, for cruelty, for the monsters she had been warned about. She found only kindness. It made no sense. Nothing made sense anymore. Slowly, trembling, she allowed them to guide her under the spray. The water was hot, truly hot. She had not felt hot water on her skin in over a year. As the filth of 12 days washed away, Margaret collapsed into sobs. Not from pain, but from relief so overwhelming it felt like breaking apart. Helen stayed with her, fully clothed beneath the spray, holding this enemy woman as she cried. Around them, other nurses did the same for the other women. They washed hair matted with filth, they cleaned wounds. They spoke softly in broken German and gentle English, offering comfort even when words failed. When Margaret stepped out, wrapped in a clean white towel, she saw herself in a fogged mirror. The face staring back was thin and haunted, but clean. For the first time in 12 days, she was clean.